Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Literally looking forward to tonight's show. I think it's going to be really enlightening and fun conversation. I will confess, you're listening to this in September. Contemporaneously, I have just gotten back from a long vacation in Canada, so I'm still a little in vacation mode, and hopefully Rachel will be all right with that. So it's a little relaxed. It's going to be a fun setting tonight. Today, it's actually, we're taping it 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, which is completely unlike anything I ever do, because we almost always tape it at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, Thursday night. So it'll be different. It's fun. I'm like being illuminated by the sun for a change instead of these awful overhead lights. But anyway, long introduction for this week's guest, Rachel Nelson. She's the host of Ufo Sunset, a live UFO news magazine show with Jeff Knox and Luis Cayetano. How'd I do on that one?
Luis.
Oh, of course. I get Cayetano right, of course, but it's Luis that I mess up. So thank you for coming on the show, Rachel. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Thank you for inviting me on the show. I have to admit I'm not super familiar with your work. I've listened to some of it, and I really want to listen to more. It looks like you've interviewed a lot of really people that are significant to me. I don't know.
It's cool. You'll find out more about me as you get into this more, I guess. I'm an old head. I'm an acquired taste. I'm like Old Bay seasoning. So we always start out the show with who is the guest. Who is Rachel Nelson? How did you get interested in all this stuff? And how did you? It's sort of it's a three-parter. I was thinking about this today. It's it's melded into a three-part opening question. Who is Rachel Nelson? How did you get interested in all this? How did you decide to go from enthusiast to content creator, personality? I'm going to start producing stuff. Because there's lots of folks who listen to the show, who watch your show, who are like, they're content just watching and enjoying it. We love those people. Those are our audiences. But there's another layer of people who are then like, you know what, I'm going to start doing something. I'm going to step out there. So that's the three-part. The bio, the background, how'd you get into all this? And then how did you get mixed up in all this?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess the first part, I was interested in this when I was a child, when I learned about like the Loch Ness Monster and the Jersey Devil, actually when I was really young, I lived in New Jersey for about, I want to say 2 years or something like that. That was some of my earliest memories. So that was when I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, but it was also when I discovered all of these different monsters that might exist, which I thought was really fascinating. And as I got older, I think I started getting really interested in UFOs, when I was 9 or 10, but I always had this very different conception of what a UFO would be like, I think, because I didn't really ever, even when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I didn't really feel like it was very likely that it would be aliens flying around in spaceships, because I was reading Douglas Adams and stuff like that at that time. And, I thought it might be some sort of, like more like something like that Charles Fort would describe or something like that, some sort of strange creature from space or from, something like that. And so I always kind of thought of UFOs as being more monster-like, but then as I got older and I started learning more about the psychological aspect of it, like I became more and more fascinated with that, in my 20s. And there's been periods of time in my life that where I really fixate on UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And those are usually, excuse me, those are usually the most troubling times of my life.
Oh no!
Yeah. So I've always been into art, and I've always kind of wanted to make art, but I've always kind of done it on my own terms. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here for a second. Well,
that's how you got interested in it. How did you decide to launch Ufo Sunset and sort of get into the mix?
Okay, yeah, and I'm sort of transitioning into that, I guess. So the last time, I think what happened was I was working as a caregiver, and I never really lose interest in the unexplained or in UFOs. So always something that I'm kind of interested in, but I was just kind of living my life for a long time, and then I was like, I really do want to do a podcast, and it's something that I was slowly working on, and I had a previous project that's no longer publicly available that was called The Shadow Mirror, that was kind of the precursor to some of the stuff that I have now on my own YouTube channel, which is really weird. But anyway, what happened was I was working as a caregiver during the pandemic. And it was a very, I ended up working as a direct support provider.
Oh boy.
So I was working, before that, I was just working as a caregiver basically for a number of years, just one-on-one in-home care kind of thing, working with people that are elderly or who have disabilities. And then I wound up doing direct support for clients, usually, in their early 20s to maybe mid 30s, but usually younger clients with developmental disabilities. And so I was doing that during the pandemic. The pandemic has kind of never stopped, but, during the lockdown, is what I mean to say.
2020-ish.
Yeah. And this was just after a couple of clients that I worked with also passed away. And I have to say this particular job that I was working on was extremely stressful for reasons I'm not precisely going to get into. But what I will say is that I was working with a population of criminal offenders, basically.
Oh boy. All right.
And they were very especially one in particular, were very difficult for me to work with, and it was very stressful. And I ended up losing my job because of a mistake that I made that was really just like a minor mistake. But I still am deeply regretful of it because, had things gone differently, it could have been much worse. And it could have actually had bad consequences, basically. I let a client into the community who I shouldn't have. I'd just gotten this client and I let them out in the community when they had a community protection program for a couple hours, And so I marked this as potential neglect in the documentation, and that went to the state, and so I was fired.
Jesus.
So the company that I worked for, they're like, hey, we have to fire you by law. So that's what happened.
Okay.
And, so at that point in time, I was working on the Shadow Mirror, and then I kind of went into crazy world and started hanging out on Twitter. And
well, that would be, if you're looking for Crazy World, you found the right place. Yeah,
exactly. But and I started working on new content. And I didn't really know what I was doing at that time because I was this was really the first time that I was seriously interacting with a lot of people interested in UFOs. And I mean, that was mostly online. And it still is. That was at that time I started interacting with Jeff Knox, and we ended up meeting. We live in the same region. He lives in Vancouver, Washington, which is also where I grew up. And it turns out we met each other like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty cool. But I became kind of really interested in what he was doing on Twitter because he just posts
a lot of stuff. Yeah, I know of Jeff. He has a lot of house problems. His house is always like falling apart. I feel so bad for him. Every time it's like UFO, and then it's like, well, my pipes burst. Here's my shit. My house is flooded. And then it's like UFO. It's like someone drove into my garage. So yeah, it's weird. His house is cursed, man.
Yeah, well, he literally is researching UFOs all the time.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's what he did. Yeah, because the car drove into the garage, and he's like, "Wait a minute, hold on, let me pause this bent waters thing I'm working on and find out what just crashed into my living room."
But yeah, so that's what was happening at that time, and I think I went into UFOs because it was like I kind of lost this, I was no longer on a career path, and I was in a very dangerous place. And so I was just like, I need to have something that's meaningful in my life, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not the first guest who's been in this kind of position who's recounted a similar experience.
Yeah. And so, like, I feel like a deep sort of spiritual affinity to UFOs. But I also think, like, on the other hand, that, well, it's complicated. And I think that this kind of, I feel like I'm missing stuff that I want to say, but I'm just going to skip on to your third part.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that, like, for a long time, I've wanted to, do something with UFOs and the unexplained, where I was adding something to it. Like, that's always been kind of the dream, of like being like, oh, well, I found something out kind of thing, like of discovering something. But over the last few years, I kind of started to feel like, well, we have all of this crap at our disposal, this, internet and devices, and it's kind of just sort of run by corporations, selling products. And so why don't people just use all of those resources however they want to, kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think I have this whole kind of sort of manifesto in my head. I think that people I think that the disciplines of learning, of higher learning, don't have to be restricted to academia, basically. That maybe in the future that things like formalized science techniques and formal forms of discourse can just take place at all, education levels, basically.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, so like right now we have it that there is a lot of citizen science, but generally what citizen science is it's like people like you have researchers in a university who, design a study, based on what they're working on. And then and then scientists, what they'll do is they'll just gather data. So they'll gather like astronomical observations, or they'll gather data on birds and stuff like that. But what if, what if like we were really maximizing like the potential of the internet and computers to like do stuff, like do grassroots stuff, and like you know what I mean? Like what if?
I think so.
I guess I feel like I'm not describing I'm not explaining myself very well, but
it's okay. No, I think I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But there's, I mean, the internet has its good and bad points, but if you can generate community and sort of that momentum of interest, for sure, absolutely. So UFO Sunset. Now I got to take issue with the UFO Sunset brand because I'm very put off by the capital U and the lowercase f and o. So at my OCD, it drives my OCD up the wall, and I've every time I've been looking, we've been communicating, setting up the interview. I'm just like, why did she write it that way? And actually, it works because it got in my head, and now I like see it that way. So it is brilliant in some ways, but in a lot of ways, I'm like, ah. So what is the stylistic choice behind the capital U, lowercase f and o? And the people listening right now are like, Binnall, what the fuck is wrong with you? But this is something that's been on my mind since I first set up the interview. So what is the stylistic choice there?
Well, it's funny, but I've actually put a lot of thought into this. I think the short answer is kind of like I was sort of inspired by that. Dang it! Who's the name of the artist? I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names, but
it's all right.
It's that famous sculpture that's love. It's just like like,
yeah, I know which one you mean.
Yeah, and like one of the letters is tilted. I felt like when I was doing the design, it actually looked really nice. I don't know, like the letters. There's a nice sort of asymmetry to it that's, especially with the font that I'm always using, like it almost has kind of like a sort of homey feel to it or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I get that vibe off of it for sure. Yeah, country store.
Yeah, or like sort of, like more intimate or personal in some way. I don't know. But the long answer is that like I actually a few years ago just stopped capitalizing UFO because I felt like when you look at a block of text, like the acronym UFO just like sticks out,
Yeah.
And lowercase just as a regular word just looks a lot better to me.
Well, I agree with you there. It's kind of like it does. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, what point does the UFO become like a word that you don't capitalize?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someday. But yeah, for sure. No, I know what you mean. It's like it sticks out like a sore thumb because you're reading it. It's like, yeah. Well, I'm a fan of a begrudging fan of the capital UFO. I'm like, at first, I'm like, this drives me nuts. Like, what? Like, this can't be a mistake. At first, I'm like, that must be a mistake. And then I'm like, no, this is purposeful. She's doing this on purpose. She's capitalizing the U, and she's got a lowercase f and a lowercase o, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And I kind of fucking love it. So it's that's where I landed on the style choice. So it works. So UFO Sunset is this live UFO news magazine show. What do you talk about on this show?
Well, we talk about UFOs and the UFO adjacent. So I do a lot of stories on just news stories on nature. That only takes about like 15 minutes of the show. But, just to like give it kind of a news format.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I'll do a lot of stories like that on space science, on solar weather, and asteroids, comets, birds, insects, all of that good stuff. A lot of it is focused around, phenomena in the sky, and flying objects,
Interesting. Okay.
usually identified, but in some way, fantastic in my view.
Yeah.
And then Jeff also he basically does, like, each week he does a different story on UFO history that he's interested in, and it's typically he goes really in depth into it.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Luis, he's kind of there and not there. He's more of a satellite host, I think. So he's
all right.
He does his sort of independent work, and but he also participates in the show, and he's done some good pieces for the show as well. And so it's really about trying to provide up-to-date fact-based information on, like, the science of UFOs, and but that's complicated. The science of UFOs is really messy. On one hand, it's pretty simple, but like, basically, I think our current knowledge of why people report UFOs and how UFO reports evolve in culture and stuff like that. Yeah. This really depends on a whole variety of different sciences. So we're trying to cover every different aspect of that. And so we try to have each episode be as substantive as possible. And but even then, just one episode is really just scratching the surface of the topic.
Yeah, for sure. No, they're pretty packed. They're interesting. Who chooses these obscure cases, Jeff? Like there's one, like the Rosedale window case. These, I've never even heard of these. The Dusky Seaside Sparrow. Where these come from?
The cases, the Dusky Seaside Sparrow is actually, that's one of my pieces. But
okay.
The pieces, the UFO cases, Jeff chooses those usually, although it looks like he's going to do this Langenberg case that one of our viewers recommended in the comments.
Gotcha.
And so that's a pretty cool case. It's definitely one of my favorites. But and Jeff is very knowledgeable on most cases, like that have, that most people, that anyone else would be aware of, because he's pretty much done research on
all that stuff.
All of that stuff. Continuous.
Well, talk about, you said the Dusky Seaside Sparrow is one of yours. So let's talk about that. Tell me, like I said, I've never heard of this case before. So lay it on me. What is the Dusky Seaside Sparrow?
So the Dusky Seaside Sparrow was a subspecies of seaside sparrow that lived in right next to Cape Canaveral and on Merritt Island, and also on Cape Canaveral, I think, but mostly on Merritt Island, and then to in some marshlands directly west of there. Across the St. Johns River, and it went extinct in basically during the 80s. What happened was
the 1980s.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So it's just a really tragic story, and basically what happened is, that area was sprayed with DDT, but they also NASA, built their rocket launching bases there, Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, and those two, and during the process of doing that, they basically built these. I can't remember what it's called. I'm sorry, but they separated the marshes so that they could flood them to kill off the mosquitoes, because there were just crazy mosquitoes there.
I bet.
But in doing so, they also decimated the Dusky Seaside Sparrow.
Oh, no.
And so this is not a story that's directly related to UFOs, but I think it's culturally relevant to UFOs because basically the space program and the Apollo program and stuff like that, and the Gemini programs were really, correlated to the extinction of this bird, of this,
That's true. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know if subspecies go extinct or if they're extirpated. I think it would be called an extinction if it's an entire subspecies. But
yeah, well, interesting.
And I think there's this kind of in and around popular UFO culture, there's this sort of fetishizing of futuristic technology. There's a lot of futurism, that runs parallel to just regular futurism. Like a lot of these UFOs, they're compared to cars and stuff like that in UFO reports. And Bob Lazar, famously talked about or infamously, I should say, talked about his seeing a Corvette model or something.
Yeah.
This flying saucer, flying saucers are I feel like they're very much constructed by human culture. And so as a result, they look just like, some futuristic design for a vehicle, made by humans,
Yeah.
And, but I feel like there's a lot of unidentified flying objects in the sky that are things like bugs and birds and stuff like that, just doing weird stuff, and nobody really cares or notices at all.
Yeah. Well, you kind of alluded to this earlier. You were a subscriber to the sky creature hypothesis, or at least maybe a fan of it. I am a fan of the idea that some of these things are creatures that we maybe haven't been able to pin down just yet because they live in the sky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. I don't really necessarily believe that, I don't think it's like a Nope type scenario where,
right.
But I do think that I kind of conceptualize UFOs differently, I guess. So I think, a UFO can be very mundane, or it could be very small,
Yeah, for sure.
So if someone sees, a new species of bug or something that hasn't been documented or something like that, I think that qualifies as a UFO.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I suppose. How far away is the bug? It's just I'm trying to imagine how you would. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
but I mean that's the other thing too that I've been thinking a lot about is that ufology, whatever that's supposed to mean, is very much based around people's reports. Be they UFO reports or abduction reports. They might not even be correlated with UFOs at all. The report might just be oh, I saw, a being or something, and they associate it with UFOs somehow, but it doesn't actually have anything to do with UFOs. And, I mean, I always think I think the most useful way to define the term UFO is, one of the more useful ways is the Heinekian definition of something that is reported and then it remains unidentified even after being really rigorously examined by experts,
Right. Yeah.
Or I think because I think what people are trying to get at in studying UFOs, or what they were trying to in the 20th century, maybe a little bit more, is unexplained things in the sky, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I always envisioned it, and why I found it fascinating was, so wait, there are things in the sky and people don't know what they are? That's crazy, and so the whole alien spacecraft thing just seems so dumb to me. Like, because it's like, I mean, not to offend anyone, but just that's how I see it. Like, personally. What's that?
Yes, that's fine. No, you're not going to offend anyone with that.
Okay. But like, yeah, it seems like it's so much more interesting if it's just like something like we don't even categorically know what it is, like,
right.
We don't have any kind of holotype. We don't know, like, to use Kirkpatrick's language, like, we don't have a signature, so like something that we can be like a template of different features that we can look at and be like, oh, okay, this is this type of phenomenon. It seems like UFOs should be separated from the study of UFO accounts, that those should be two separate things. Like, so if people want to understand what strange things are in the sky, they're really going to be studying physical processes and biological processes and stuff like that, mostly not really connected to anthropology.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. You're trying to say like that this should be kind of separated. Like the actual honing in on what the object itself is should be separate from what the witness is reporting, in a sense.
Yeah, but also kind of like that there should be sort of, I mean, yeah, and that separation would be like kind of like two separate fields almost, because they require different methods of study. So like on the one hand, you'd have people like trying to understand, vortices and stuff like that, and trying to locate UFOs using like sensors, trying to study things like ball lightning or like insect behavior, potentially like luminous flying animals, because that is a weird possibility, but it's one that's definitely there. I'm
a fan.
I saw a report. I found a report from the AUK, which is like a birding, an ornithology journal, and it was these people out at sea during a storm that was bioluminescent. The storm was bioluminescent, and so they saw these water birds flying in the storm, and the birds were glowing because they were covered in phosphorescence.
Oh wow!
So it seems like, and birds are really kind of fascinating too, because they'll like shine at night, especially geese. Certain types of geese can reflect the light from cities and stuff like that, and they'll flying points of light. So things like that, I think, are actually real and also really interesting, and they could potentially be sometimes reported as UFOs.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, especially something like ball lightning, which is kind of almost ball lightning is almost like a subcategory of UFOs or something, or like potential ball lightning or something like that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's in my notes, because that's one of the videos that I had that you did on UFO Sunset, earthquake lights. This is kind of connected in a sense to ball lightning. You kind of make the argument that this is another, UFO subgenre, if you will. So that you have an interest in, right?
Yeah, and I mean, when I define UFOs and stuff like that, that isn't to say that I'm not also interested in the more anthropological humanities side of it, because I really am. And I'm also really interested in like magic, and I kind of want to like approach UFOs from every single angle.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But I also want to do it in a way that is rigorous and that, is beneficial to people, that has like a positive force for good of, making people think more critically and to build their critical thinking skills and to think more like scientists,
Yeah.
There's another previous one. Actually, my favorite piece that I've done personally is about seafoam. So you might want to check that one out. Because
Seafoam.
That one I discuss the possibility that seafoam could be reported as UFOs. But
let's talk about that. Tell me why do you make that case? Make the case, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's really not even my main point.
Okay.
My main point is really just that we could look at anything, and have that serve as kind of a mythology, not anything per se, but I mean, yeah, anything. But like, there's so many other alternatives that we could use to like flying saucers and humanoids.
Right. Prosaic possibilities.
Prosaic or fantastic, it doesn't really matter. But I mean, I use seafoam as kind of a model of that, because seafoam has a lot of narrative parallels to flying saucers, and there can be entities. Seafoam plays a big role in mythology and folklore. But yeah, seafoam is also known to fly, right? So
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And there's not really a whole lot of science on flying seafoam itself, but I mean, it's really well documented. There's giant like seafoam floods, and then if those get hit by really strong winds, the seafoam just gets picked up and thrown through the air. It's just,
wow.
And the reason I got interested in that was just because I was trying to figure out if there were like naturally occurring bubbles. Like, we're all familiar with bubbles, and we see bubbles flying in the air when we blow bubbles, right?
Yeah.
But like, when do you see bubbles flying in the air in nature? And the seafoam is the main example that I found, but there's also another kind of, there's a type of plant that produces this resin like inside of its like branches that like this oil, and so you break a branch and then you can blow on it and it produces bubbles. Just like
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm really wondering, like, what other sorts of airborne bubbles are produced in nature. If any of your viewers, have an answer to that question, or if you do,
yes,
assume you don't.
Aerial bubbles. Yeah. No, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. There's many different explanations for what these could be besides aliens visiting from another world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when someone reports a UFO, they're almost certainly not going to be reporting something exotic or otherworldly. It's almost always going to be something that we already have an explanation for, which means that, the main body of evidence that people rely on, for coming up with, UFOs being this exotic thing, like aliens or something to do with the control system hypothesis or anything that's really exotic, is that, the vast majority of people reporting UFOs, like they're reporting just mundane things, or, like it could just be, like they're having their own experience, that they're going through. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually happening in the external world. And this is
for sure.
This is important because for a number of reasons. One is that, people with mental health issues can get targeted by, people, in MUFON or associated with like the disclosure movement and stuff like that. They can be exploited. If they had some experience that was fantastic to them, then that could be twisted and used to basically make money or to get attention. But I mean, I think the other reason too is that I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. Well, yeah, it is interesting. What you're saying about, people with mental health issues being taken advantage of by the UFO community. But that's been going on forever, I think. Remember talking a long time ago to Jeremy Vanny, like when we first started the show almost 20 years ago. And it was like I've always found it interesting that the alien abductee is not actually was never kind of like, they were a specimen to the UFO community as a whole. And it was like a very different power dynamic there that nobody ever talked about back then. I don't even know if anybody talks about it now. Although I guess with Emma Woods coming forward with all of her experiences, that kind of blew the lid off of sort of the idea that I was talking about way back when, which is like these folks are treated as specimens by overzealous people who were like, you have all the answers to what these aliens are. So now I'm going to exploit you, essentially, and treat you like a specimen. Yeah,
Jack Brewer talks a lot about that in the Grace as well.
That's who put me on to your work, Rachel, actually. Jack Brewer. He's like, Rachel Nelson, UFO Sunset. He's like, you should check out her stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a problem. And it's, so you're right. Absolutely. People, they should be sort of maybe ushered into some kind of like more helpful environment rather than immediately brought to the MUFON convention.
Yeah. And I think that there's this misconception, cultural anthropology, I think, is also really important, because there's a lot of misconceptions about different subcultures or different groups of people that hold certain types of belief. And, like being and having, non-materialist or having spiritual or religious beliefs isn't a bad thing in and of itself. And there are actually lots of really positive communities, around the occult and around magic and stuff like that, that also draw on para-weird and UFOs as well. I'm thinking of, what I've been most personally exposed to online is like Liminal Earth, AP Strange, who I'm a big fan of, Professor Lamb, my friend Stephanie Quick, people like that. I think there are actually a lot of people who engage with that in a constructive way. It's like a culturally constructive way, and not trying to exploit people or grift or anything like that. But using trying to create like a positive relationship with the unexplained. I think that's a really good thing. I was thinking a lot about this lately, how, fairy lore and yokai lore and other, these types of sort of otherworldly lore in different cultures, they go through different different sort of like phases, of being like first sort of just like indigenous religion, and then into a phase of like sort of marginalized folk beliefs and practices. And then that gets transitioned into modern pop culture, basically.
Okay.
So like
Bigfoot.
Like Bigfoot, yeah, exactly. Like they're, when you go really, really, really far back, you have these wild man stories that are actually incorporated into people's religions and histories, and then that gets marginalized by Christianity, so you still have things like, the Green Man and stuff like that, but they're not as visible, and they're not really a part of the official story. Or like another example I was thinking of is like Kappa, which the Kappa is a type of yokai that was originally like probably worshipped as water spirits or something like that. And then when Buddhism and more formalized Shinto came into prominence, then like the Kappa became more of a sort of legendary folk figure that was marginalized by other more prominent like gods and spirits. And then the Kappa became, like a sort of pop culture icon, through things like anime, like, like things like Pokemon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that like maybe that's really what UFO lore needs, is it needs to transition away from this very serious like religious sort of thing that's going on right now that's really scary and full of like intelligence agents and crap, and moved more towards like just making fun art,
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I mean UFOs has become like sort of this blossoming thing of different. I mean, it's become part of the cultural zeitgeist and pop culture, and there is that one fun side, there's a different side. I mean, it's kind of like it really is so multifaceted now.
Mm-hmm. It's complicated.
It certainly is. It certainly is. What do you make of the contemporary scene right now? Are you as pessimistic about it as I am? It sounds like you are, based on what you've said so far.
Yes, I'm very, very pessimistic, and but I'm also kind of, I don't know. I just have like this sort of vision in my head, of kind of like what I want to see, sort of, and I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it tonight, but like I think that there's real potential for having a positive UFO culture in the future, and I see that now, but it's not very obvious. Because I think a lot of people that are around UFOs that are actually cool, that aren't bad people, or that aren't just, really misled, a lot of those people don't directly associate with UFOs, or they associate with them in an like an anti way, like just saying like, well, we don't want to associate with UFOs because of all of this crap. And I kind of understand that impulse because all of the crap, it really does run deep, and it runs all the way through the history of the UFO era, with bad actors and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there are so many people who are like, who do see UFOs in a rational way and are still interested in them, that there's, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's all right. There are bad actors mixed up in this, especially, I try to differentiate, and I get what you're saying about the field has a long history of unsavory characters. That's anyone who knows about the history of UFO studies and flying saucers knows that, but especially nowadays, it is even more problematic. That's why I try to differentiate into the new era as the UAP era. Let them have that. Let them be that.
Yeah,
let us kind of stay in the world of UFOs, which isn't this militarized, weaponized bro culture.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Yeah. And there is a kind of trend, and I've seen a lot of people saying that, saying things like, let's just have it be UFOs. Screw UAP. That doesn't. Yeah,
that the UAP stuff is the government stuff and all the shit that's happened post 2017. Most of us who are into UFOs before then are all set with everything after that. So it's a bummer. But like you said earlier, I was going to say this. You mentioned like there should be sort of like people that look at different aspects of the UFO phenomenon. It's like it used to be that way. Like you had fucking Bruce Maccabee, who was like the photo guy, and you had the trace case guy. I think maybe Len Springfield or something like that. I'm bad with names as well. But there were people who had sort of specializations. But now I think it's like the old guard there's nobody left to be a specialist, sadly, in this day and age.
Yeah, I think the people that I think of are the UFO history group.
Right.
Because they're doing actual research and it's and it's actually good. Like it's not just, just trying to like force a conclusion kind of stuff, but they're just like the reliable UFO witness testimony, which we're also doing a book club on the show.
Oh, cool.
That's what I think of when I think of like UFO studies as being interdisciplinary. As a lot of the authors are not UFO specialists, but some of them are, and the people that are, I think, come from different backgrounds too. I've been really inspired by Thomas Bullard, who, because he approached UFOs from a folkloristic point of view, basically studying UFO folklore, and that's really, really central to understanding how UFO reports work. So a lot of the best UFO research over the past 40 or 50 years has come out of just studying people's accounts, but doing it, using scientific methods.
Yeah. Well, all we have is the phenomenon and the witnesses, so it's really it's a dance. It's a dance between the two. Have you ever experienced anything? Have you ever seen a UFO?
I've never seen a UFO. I mean, I saw things that I couldn't identify at the time, but I later was able to identify them. Like I saw iridium flares and I couldn't figure out what they were for a while. And then I finally figured out what they were.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, I've had experiences, but they're not,
ufological.
They're not really, they don't fit the mold. They're not like, I guess they're not para-weird. They're not like, I mean, they're, like a lot of the spiritual stuff I think is unexplained, but it's not like, it doesn't fit in that category, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a big part of me that really wants to call myself an experiencer, just because, I feel like an experiencer. Like my internal world is very experiency, but I don't have like, I can't be like, oh, I saw like this monster or something like that,
Right.
And I have kind of envious of people that see weird entities, to be honest.
Maybe once. I don't know if I'd be envious if I'd see them all the time, but maybe once or maybe twice. Once to see it, and the second time to be like, all right, that definitely is what I saw. But then after that, I think like, I don't need to see that again.
Yeah. But yeah, I've had like weird spiritual experiences, and I have weird beliefs and stuff like that, like personal beliefs.
Now, one of the videos you did on UFO Sunset was phantom airship stories. You talked a little bit about that. So give me the rundown on that, because I am fascinated by that. I think we talked about it a long time ago with Walter Bosley a little bit, but it's been a long time since we explored these cases. So what drew your interest to this phenomenon?
Airships was one of the things that catalyzed my interest in UFOs when I was really, really young, because I read The Great Airship Mystery, which this piece is actually based on, largely, not entirely. I did a bunch of other research as well, but by Daniel Cohen, and I also found couple of errors in that book while I was doing my research. It's still a really good book, and I still recommend it, even though it's from like the early 80s. It's still a good, useful introduction to the topic. So back in the 19th century, people would report sighting airships, and this was at a time when airships they weren't truly dirigible. Most of the time, there were like experimental airships, but they couldn't like fly against the wind. They were basically just funny shaped balloons. And, people would report sighting them, especially later and later in the century, when they appeared in popular science fiction and stuff like that. there were more and more reports of them, and there was a huge wave of airship sightings in newspapers, starting in California and on the West Coast, and then spreading out through to the Midwest. So just, hundreds or thousands of people reporting, lights in the sky and strange, airship craft, which are often sort of like, blimps with carriages underneath or maybe with wings attached and stuff like that. But sometimes they would be other sort of weird flying contrivances and, just people like flying with wings and stuff like that. And there were also, my piece kind of just really focused on the parallels between that wave in 1896 and 1897 and the whole modern UFO era, because there's a lot of parallels. There was fantastic stories of close encounters with entities, strange humanoids, some of the there's the Aurora crash, which is a very famous case that has been investigated, really heavily, and has huge modern controversies surrounding it, basically. But it was just like this guy out, well, anyway, I'm going to get the details all wrong, but it's basically this report of a Martian airship crashing in a little town in Texas. And although I guess it was a little bit bigger then or something. Anyway, there was a lot of the features of UFO stories and UFO lore that we have today that we associate with the flying saucer era really, really existed before, but people totally forgot about it for whatever reason. There was this period basically from that time, from 1897 up to 1947, where you have waves of airship reports and you have waves of, different weird lights in the sky and reports of things like that. And also really interesting individual reports and stuff. But it seems like during that period, there's no uniform thing. There was a huge wave that crossed all of America. And then you have similar waves in other places, but they don't last as long. They're smaller. And then in 1947, there's this blossoming into this whole UFO global culture and lore. And so but it could have, it's what would it have taken for it to have happened in 1897 instead of 1947,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, I guess my question for you is, you allude to these parallels between the two eras. What do you think the reasoning is behind that? Do you think there's some kind of other, I don't know. What do you some kind of ebb and flow of some kind of etheric force that causes this thing to keep happening? I mean, what is you say there's these parallels. So what do you think's behind the parallels?
Well, this wasn't really the first sort of wave like this, because actually there were balloon waves going all the way back to the 18th century when the Montgolfier brothers made their first hot air balloon flight, which was another important landmark in human flight. And in 1891, there was there were waves of navigable balloons in Poland, in what is now Poland, and that they thought that they were coming from Germany. And in the airship wave of the 1890s, there were rumors that this had something to do with the Spanish, the war between Spain and Cuba at the time. And also there were some of them were associated with Andre's flight over the North Pole. This guy tried to fly over the North Pole at that time as well, like right around that time.
Okay.
And so, and the 1909 airship wave, as well as like the 1913 airship wave and the 1891 Poland balloon wave, those are all associated with, anxieties having to do with war.
Interesting. Have you, I'm going to jump in here now on you. Have you looked into Eric Wallet's work?
No, I haven't.
Look into that. Eric Wallet wrote a whole book about UFO flaps being connected with social anxiety, and he traced it pretty spot on, and it's very, very interesting. It's a very compelling theory. He sort of posits that it's like a metaphysical kind of thing. Like there's anxiety on the ground, and in turn that somehow creates this phenomenon in the sky. It's fascinating. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Eric Wallet. He was on Binnall America 15 years ago, probably now. It's been a long time.
I'll find it.
I'll send it to you after the show. But yeah, that's exactly his whole thesis is exactly what you're describing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that plays a role. Like for a little while, I was kind of like not convinced that it had to do a lot with, anxieties having to do with war. But I think, after doing that piece, I kind of felt more like that plays a factor. But I think there's other things going on, like technology as well. I think that technological development and the way that futuristic technology is depicted in sci-fi also can play a big role too. Like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, is an example that Mark Pilkington wrote about. This was when after that movie came out, there was a huge surge in UFO reports. If my memory serves me well, like 1977 through 1980 was a big UFO period.
Absolutely. Pop culture is another driving force. It's very interesting. It's like you think nowadays, like people now are more apt to see UFOs because it's more popular and in the zeitgeist. So they're, it's like the old thing, like no one's really looking for them. Unless it gets to be like a hot topic of conversation, then people like look up for a change, and there it is.
And there's a lot of really cool stuff in the sky too that you can see.
Absolutely. Well, I was thinking too, as we were talking, it's like these things evolve over time, but in a way too, it's like, what is a drone but the ultimate phantom airship? Right. Yeah. It's a mysterious aerial craft. You have no idea who's behind it or what. If a little thing flew into your backyard, you're like, I know that's a drone, but you still don't know anything about where it came from, who's behind it or whatever. It's a phantom airship. It's a contemporary version of the phantom airship.
Yeah. What if they had a phantom drone? What if people started reporting phantom drones? That would be crazy. Like there would be no way for you to like determine if they were phantom drones or not. I don't know.
I've read stories about people who were like, someone's flying a drone over my house. So it's kind of like percolating under the surface, but it's kind of like those creepy clowns. Like, who knows? One day, one story like that might just take hold, and next thing you know, it's a national concern. It's like, who are flying drones over these places and people's houses and shit. So yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't become a thing yet.
Yeah, that latest clown panic that wasn't that. I want to research that more because there was a movie that someone made that played a huge role in that or something like that. Like they made like these viral videos that went into this kind of documentary sort of thing. Like so it was
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. So this is UFO Sunset. That's a weekly show. How often do you do the show with Jeff and is it? Let me try again. Luis. All right.
Yes. Yeah, that's every week. We do a scripted show 1 week, and then we do a chat show the following week.
Oh, okay. And who writes the scripts for the show?
Well, mainly me and Jeff. Yeah, I mean, Jeff basically just writes notes that he draws from, but his notes are pretty extensive, like kind of almost like halfway between a script and halfway between notes, I guess.
That makes sense. Yeah, when his water heater isn't bursting or something like that. I don't mean to make light, Jeff. I know you're listening. I don't mean to make light. It's just I've noticed a pattern here, and it's you gotta maybe think about moving. I don't know what's going on with that house of yours, dude.
It's because of the UFOs. There's
a
lot of curse upon him. Yeah.
Yes. Hopefully, yeah. As long as he doesn't start blaming the government that like he's a targeted individual by the government. They keep bursting his pipes and causing his windows to leak condensation. Oh man. Well, it's clear you think very deeply about the subject. Where do you envision UFO Sunset, your personal brand, your research going as you continue onward and looking into this stuff?
Well, I don't really know, but I think what I want to do is eventually, I want to move offline in the future, not right away.
Join the club. Oh my God, yeah, it's the golden handcuffs. It's the bane of our existence, isn't it? It's like, yeah, believe me, if we all could just live in the same little town, it would be awesome. But unfortunately, we have to rely on the internet. Yeah,
weirdo town.
Exactly.
That's kind of like I that's how I've envisioned it for a long time, though. Yeah, I was like, I should make content online for a while, use that to kind of like maybe springboard into a different type of project, and then eventually just phase out my time online and spend more and more time working on stuff in real life. But that's connected to all this, so my ideal dream is, kind of to move, maybe like have like some sort of third space for para-weird people in this area or something like that, and UFO people, and it would be a place for doing research, like to have an archive and like just have like small local events as well as potentially larger events like festivals or something like that too.
And where is where you are?
I'm in Portland.
Sorry, I told you all I'm still on vacation mode. So if I may repeat myself, where is where you are?
Well, where I am is where I am, which is...
yes, isn't that always the case?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
Vancouver,
ample opportunity for strange happenings and strange gatherings.
That's true. Yeah, I actually met the Polybius kid. Weird kid.
Who is the... Wait, I don't know. Yeah, who is the Polybius kid? Who is this character?
I just made that up. You're familiar with Polybius, though, right? The Polybius conspiracy or whatever.
It may ring a bell if you tell me about it. What is the Polybius conspiracy?
It's an urban legend that there was this in an arcade game in a video game arcade in the early 80s in Portland, and that like would like make kids go insane, or like they would get sick and stuff like while playing it or something. And then
oh my God, I love every aspect of this story. Yeah, go on.
And then like some like government agents came or something to like take it away, or I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like, I think it was made up in like the 2000s or something, but it's still a really cool story.
That's a fantastic story. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, well, I empathize with you because like I said, getting offline would be. I talk about this with Matt Hopewell, AP Strange a lot, because we're both in the New England area, and it's like it would be much, I don't know, refreshing and sort of maybe more beneficial to get more communal and sort of do more stuff with actual people in a localized area rather than and I mean, I love all the people listening from all over the world, obviously, but it's like, it would be a completely different experience, I think, and you would really be able to experience more in that format or something, in that way of living.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of people here that are that are interested in the weird, and people that are that do content and stuff like that, and that are involved online as well. But I don't know. I've just been I'm still very much in pandemic mode, and I bet there are a lot of other people that are too, So I've been struggling to kind of get involved in the community more again. I used to be more involved in stuff, but mostly it's just been this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, the pandemic's kind of making a comeback or something like that. But I haven't. I kind of on the way back from Canada, I was like, if I'm going to get this, I haven't had it COVID yet, so I'm actually very lucky. Knock on. I really will do it. I don't want to break my streak. Knock on wood. But I thought to myself, coming back from Canada, I'm like, well, if I'm going to get fucking COVID, it's going to be this week because I was around a lot of people. So I'm going to get the Canadian strain of COVID, which God knows what that'll be like. Hopefully it's 75% less bad than the American version.
It comes with free healthcare.
Yeah, no shit. I'm going to drive back up there and be like, hey, you all gave it to me. You're treating me now. So that's how it's going to work here, Canada.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. You were super cool about rescheduling. We were supposed to do it last weekend, but I'm like, I got to get to Canada. And so we immediately jumped it to right after I got back. And I appreciate your patience with me here today. As I've been a little slower on the draw than I usually am, but I've really enjoyed the conversation quite a bit. As I said, I could tell you put a lot of thought into this subject. You bring a unique perspective to the phenomenon. Like you were saying earlier, there's all these other possibilities that we need to maybe consider, and you don't often hear that, very often. So I really appreciate that perspective, and I'm going to keep following your stuff, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. And for folks who want to check out more from you, they can go to Ufo Sunset 1947 on YouTube, or just punch in on the Google machine, Ufo Sunset 1947, for more from Rachel Nelson. So thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor.
Oh,
it is.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't know what to say. You've humbled me.